Dawn crept slow and pale across the frost-covered prairie, the kind of light that seemed unsure whether to rise at all. The air bit hard enough to steal a man's breath, and Silas Boone's horse steamed like a phantom against it. He'd left for Cheyenne a week ago, but a weight had settled in his gut halfway down the trail, something wordless, a tug that wouldn't let him go. So he'd turned back, riding through the night, his mind restless, the world too still. Now, as his ranch took shape against the pale rim of dawn, something in that stillness went wrong. No smoke rose from the chimney. No sound but wind whispering across the snow. The fences cast long shadows like black ribs in the frost. The air had that strange hush, like the earth holding its breath. The wind carried a sound that wasn't there, laughter missing, warmth gone, as if the house itself had turned its back as he swung down from his horse. Boots crunching, breath fogging white. And there, against the barn wall, three small shapes huddled together, blanketed in rags and cold light. His heart fell clean through him. Eli? His voice cracked. Sam? Tommy. The eldest boy lifted his head, lips blue, eyes glassy. Tommy whimpered. Sam tried to smile, but couldn't. Silas knelt, gathering them close, the cold biting through his gloves. Lord help me, he whispered. Eli shuddered, his voice faint as smoke. She said, we made too much noise. Tommy mumbled nonsense, his little hands stiff as wood. Silas stood, rage and fear wrestling in his chest. He crossed to the door and slammed his shoulder against it. Once, twice, until the wood splintered. Inside, heat hit him like a slap. The fire burned steady in the hearth. The air smelled of stew, and Mara stood there, framed in the glow, hair loose around her face, calm as still water. For a long moment neither spoke. Then, low and ragged, Silas said, you locked my boys outside. She didn't cry, didn't flinch, only met his eyes and said, quiet and flat, they were wild, Silas. They needed to learn quiet. The silence that followed pressed heavier than shouting. Even the fires seemed to shrink. He stared at her, the woman he'd once pitied enough to marry, the one he'd thought he could save. Pack your things, he said. She didn't move. He turned, carried his sons inside, one by one. He set them near the stove, pulled blankets around them. Their small hands clutched his coat. His own hands trembled, not from cold, from something deeper, something he didn't have words for. Outside, the wind keened through the cottonwoods, a sound between mourning and judgment. By nightfall, word had spread. It always did. Clara Hayes came by with blankets and soup, her breath clouding in the cold. She was kind, but her eyes carried questions. She sat the pot on the stove, glancing toward the back room where the boys slept. Silas leaned against the counter, weary, his face drawn. I heard, she said softly. Half the town did. He didn't reply. She hesitated, lowering her voice. Mara ain't evil, Silas. Just broken. Town never forgave her for what she was before. He looked up. Her tone wasn't cruel, it was pitying. But it burned all the same. Through Clara's words, the past came back sharp and colorless. He'd met Mara 2 winters ago, in a saloon up in Casper. She'd been scrubbing tables, face bruised with shame the way some women carried pearls. The town men had used her name like a joke. But when she'd smiled that one small, wounded smile at him, he'd seen something else. Not sin, but survival. He'd thought marriage could heal her, could quiet both their ghosts. He'd brought her home against the town's whispers, set her at his table, called her wife. Now, as Clara stirred the fire, he saw what that dream had cost. Outside, horses stamped in the snow. Inside, shame thickened like smoke. They'll talk, Clara said finally. They'll say she's what they always said she was. Silas rubbed his temples. Let him talk. His voice was quiet, rough. I'm done listening to cowards. But when she left, and silence fell again, the words he'd spoken felt thin. Truth was, he wasn't angry at the town. He was angry at himself, for thinking love alone could undo a lifetime of cold. Mara stayed, not because she was welcome, but because Silas couldn't send her into the snow. The house was too quiet now, the air brittle with things unsaid. A tea supper, spoons clinked softly. No one met her eyes. Eli ate with his jaw tight, Sam staring into his bowl. Tommy, pale and weak, leaned against his father's arm. Mara moved carefully, like the sound of her own footsteps might break something. When night fell, Silas stood outside the boys' door, listening to their steady breathing. Then his gaze drifted across the hall. Through the crack beneath her door, a sliver of light flickered. Her shadow moved slowly, then stilled, as if she were sitting in prayer. He didn't enter that a man can forgive a mistake, he thought, but when kindness freezes, it takes more than warmth to bring it back. That he turned away. Shoulders heavy as stone. By morning, Tommy had a fever. The cough rattled him, his small body trembling under the quilt. Silas stayed by his side, feeding him sips of water. The other boys hovered close, worry in their eyes. Mara stood at the door, still, pale. Her hands twisted in her apron. She stepped forward finally, holding a bowl of broth. Her voice was faint. "He needs to eat." Silas didn't look up. "Leave it." She placed it on the table beside the bed, her eyes darting toward the boy. Tommy stirred, lips dry. "Thank you, Ma," he whispered, barely audible. Something in her face cracked thin, a tremor of pain, relief, and disbelief. She turned quickly and left before anyone saw her tears. Later that day, Clara came again, her shawl dusted with snow. She sat beside Silas, who hadn't left Tommy's side. "You'll wear yourself down?" she said softly. He said nothing. She looked toward the empty doorway where Mara had stood hours earlier. "Don't let anger rot what could still heal." Her words hung in the air long after she left. That night, Silas sat by the window, lamp low, the ranch hushed. Snow drifted sideways, soft against the glass. He found himself remembering a different night, Mara hanging laundry under a spring sky, the way she'd laughed when the sheet caught her hair. A small laugh, unguarded, alive. He wondered where that woman had gone, and if she'd ever come back. The days that followed carried a strange, tender ache. Mara began sleeping in the barn, unasked. She mended tack, brushed the horses, spoke to no one. Her silence wasn't defiance, it was apology. Eli watched her sometimes through the window, expression torn between anger and pity. Sam, smaller and softer, asked one evening, "Pa, she ever coming back inside?" Silas stared into the fire. "Don't rightly know. But when the wind howled that night, he left a lantern and half a loaf of bread on the barn step. That was his mercy. Quiet, without witness. The next morning, the bread was gone. In town, the gossip turned meaner. Folks at the mercantile whispered louder when Silas walked in. One man muttered, "Guess the saloon girl showed her true nature." Before he could respond, Clara, standing near the counter, said clear as a bell, "None of us know what cold makes a person do." Her voice cut through the room like light through smoke. The whispers died. Silas looked at her, grateful, though neither spoke. That night, snow came heavy again, muffling the world. Through the frosted window, Silas saw the barn's faint glow, Mara's lantern swaying like a lonely star. He stood a long time watching, unsure what he felt. Pity, anger, love. All of it tangled. Out there, she knelt in the straw, head bowed, whispering something he couldn't hear. The light flickered against her face, softening its edges. He pressed his palm to the cold glass. Forgiveness, he thought, ain't something you give once. It's something you keep giving until it stays. And as the snow thickened, covering every scar and track, the house fell into a silence that was almost peace, or maybe just the start of it. The storm came without warning, a white roar that swallowed the sky whole. By dusk, the valley vanished beneath it. Wind howled through every crack in the boards, shaking the glass panes, making the chimney moan like some lost soul. Silas woke near midnight to a sound that didn't belong to the wind. Faint, desperate, almost human. A cry carried between the gusts. He sat up, heart thudding. The boys were asleep, tangled in quilts. The fire had burned low. He pulled on his coat, grabbed his lantern, and stepped into the storm. The cold hit like a wall. Snow sliced across his face, stinging his skin. Every breath felt carved from ice. The sound came again. From the barn that he trudged toward it, boots sinking deep. The lantern's light flickered, a trembling little sun in a sea of white. When he reached the barn, he found the door half buried in snow. He forced it open with his shoulder and froze. Inside, Mara was on her knees in the straw, her arms wrapped around the mare's neck. A beam had fallen from the rafters, trapping the animal's leg. The horse kicked and screamed, eyes rolling wild. Mara's hands were torn open, blood dark against the straw. She'd been there for hours. "Silas," She gasped when she saw him, voice nearly gone. "She's stuck. I can't." He dropped the lantern, rushed forward, grabbed the beam. Together they heaved, bodies straining, wood creaking. The horse screamed again, then stumbled free. For a moment, silence. Just the two of them breathing. Ragged, white fog in the cold air. Mara collapsed, trembling. Tears streaked her face, leaving clean lines through the dust. "Why?" he asked, voice barely audible. She pressed her hands to her face, sobbing. "Because she was crying. I couldn't leave her. Not again." Silas knelt beside her, steadying her shoulder. And then, through shaking breaths, it came, the truth she'd buried beneath anger and pride. "I didn't lock them out because I hated them," she whispered. "I was afraid. Afraid they'd never love me. Afraid you'd see me the way the town does. A mistake you can't take back." They were loud that night, wild, and I thought if I didn't control it, I'd lose what little I had left. But I lost it anyway. The words broke apart in tears. Silas said nothing for a long while. Just listened to the wind batter the barn walls. Then, softly, "Fear don't make you cruel, Mara. Not mending it does." He reached for her hand, rough, bleeding, and held it. For the first time since he'd come home, she didn't pull away. When dawn crept up again, weak and pale, they walked to the house together. The kitchen felt strange with both of them there. The boys blinked sleep from their eyes, silent, confused. Mara set her coat aside, hair damp from melted snow. She moved to the stove, hands trembling but sure, and began to cook. The sound of a spoon against the pot was soft, careful, like a peace offering. Eli and Sam sat watching, wary. When she set the plates before them, Tommy sniffed the air, eyes lighting faintly. "It smells good," he said, voice still weak. Mara hesitated. I thought you might like biscuits." She knelt beside the table, palms flat, and looked each of them in the eye. "I was wrong," she said. "You didn't deserve what I did. I'll spend every day proving that if you let me." Tommy reached for her sleeve first, a small hand, sticky with honey. Eli's jaw clenched, but when he glanced at his father and saw Silas nod once, he passed her the buttered, and one spoke of forgiveness. They just ate together for the first time in weeks. The sound of spoons and soft breathing filling the room like prayer outside. The snow began to ease. When the thaw came, Clara Hayes appeared again, hat pulled low, cheeks red from wind. "There's talk of you all coming to church this Sunday," she said, smile tugging at her mouth. Silas looked up from fixing the fence. "Talk from who?" "Half the town. Other half will follow if you show." He thought about it that night. The pews, the stairs, the whispers. Mara said nothing, but he caught her folding the boys' clean shirts late, smoothing each one with slow hands. Sunday came bright and cold. They rode in together, the boys in front, Mara sitting stiff beside Silas. Heads turned as they passed. A few whispers, some pitying smiles to eye in the churchyard. A man muttered under his breath, just loud enough. "Guess the saloon girls found herself another crowd." Mara froze. The words hit her like a lash. Her breath caught, eyes darting toward the ground. Silas reached over and took her hand. Firm, visible. "She's my wife," he said, his voice carrying clear across the yard. "And ain't a soul here without winter in their heart. Some just hide it better." The murmur died. Clara, standing near the doorway, smiled softly, proud and silent. Inside, when they sat down together, Mara's hand trembled, but she didn't pull away. Weeks passed, and winter finally let go. The valley turned green again, soft grass rippling like water under the wind. The Boone ranch, once silent, began to hum with small sounds. The boys' laughter, the clink of buckets, a woman's voice humming low over the sink. Mara worked alongside Silas in the fields. Her hands roughened, her arms grew strong. Sometimes they spoke, sometimes they didn't, but the quiet between them no longer hurt. It healed. Silas found her one evening mending Tommy's coat by the fire. The lamplight haloed her hair, her head bent in concentration. "You stayed," he said softly. She looked up, needle paused mid-stitch. "Because they needed me to." He nodded, the corner of his mouth softening. "So did I." No more words were needed. Then came the flood. Spring rain had been steady for days, swelling the river past its banks. The ground turned to mud, the water roaring down from the hills like something alive. When Eli saw a calf swept into the current, he ran without thinking, Silas shouted after him. Too late. The boy slipped, fell, vanished beneath the churning brown water. Mara screamed his name and ran. Without a thought, she leapt in, skirts dragging, boots sinking, arms thrashing against the cold. The current tore at her, but she caught him, somehow, clutching his collar. Kicking toward the bank, Silas splashed in waist-deep, hauling them both out by sheer strength. Eli coughed hard, sputtering water, alive. Mara collapsed beside him, shaking. Her face was white, lips blued as he knelt beside her, hands trembling. "You fool woman," he whispered, voice breaking. "You could have." She looked up at him, water streaming down her cheeks like tears. "No one," she gasped, "gets locked out again. Not ever." He pulled her close then, the boys crowding around them, shivering and crying all at once. And for the first time, Silas didn't hold his tears back either. That night, after the storm passed, the house glowed with lamplight and laughter. The smell of stew, wet wool, and wood smoke filled the air. The boys talked over each other, telling the story to anyone who'd listen. Though no one would ever hear it the way it really happened, Silas stood at the doorway, hat in his hands, watching them. Mara was at the table, drying Tommy's hair with a towel, her smile small but real. For a long time, he just watched, the warmth, the sound, the simple miracle of it all. Outside, the river still murmured, but its fury was gone. Only the quiet rush of water under stars. Some winters don't end when the snow melts, he thought. They end when a heart learns to open its door again. He stepped inside, closing the door gently behind him. And to the listener, to anyone who's ever turned away too soon, the story leaves a whisper. If you've ever locked someone out, or stood shivering outside a door that wouldn't open, remember this: mercy comes quiet, like dawn after the longest night. You don't have to deserve it. You just have to keep the fire lit, so when it comes, it knows where to find you.